Let's talk.
Giles Brown.
The Shetland Way, Community and Climate Crisis on My Father's Islands, is a new book by Marianne Brown, offering a fascinating insight into a unique place that holds past and future in what's been described as an uneasy tension. Delighted to say that Marianne Brown joins us live on the line now. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on the show.
Pleasure's mine. Whereabouts are you, by the way, today?
I'm in Devon, southwest England.
So for those who sort of don't know about the Shetland Islands and the Shetland Islands, if you like, give us, if you can, a sort of Shetland Island 101.
Oh, crikey. So I'm on the sort of extreme southwest of the British Isles at the minute. Shetland's in the extreme northeast. It's kind of between Norway and northern Scotland, and it's a substantial ferry journey. Just to give you an idea of the distance, it takes 14 hours from Aberdeen to Lerwick on the ferry, so it's a long way. And historically, they haven't really seen themselves as Scottish. So it's a population of about 23,000 people, and up until the 15th century, it was actually part of the Danish Empire. So and there was a different language, really, which was a sort of combination of Scots and Norwegian, called Norn, which died out really in the 19th century. But it's quite a distinct culture. And but, you know, as with everywhere else, like globalization and also just movements of populations has meant that identity is sort of a bit more diffused now.
I mean,
it's becoming,
being where it is, I mean, obviously history buffs will absolutely love this sort of place, because it is, you could say it's almost like a time capsule, and it is independent. It isn't like Scotland. It isn't like Denmark. They are fiercely, you know, Shetland Islands are fiercely independent and proud of their culture.
Yeah, definitely proud of their culture. I mean, it's an interesting place because, I didn't grow up there. My dad was from there, and he was born and bred Shetlander, but he was part of the sort of generation, the brief moment in our recent history where it was possible for working class people to basically move up the class and get a job. And he left Shetland and went to art school, and then, became an academic at Glasgow Art School, and couldn't stay there until he retired. So we went to Shetland for holidays and for, you know, but I didn't really have a strong connection with it. But the place itself, it's very much, and this is only something I recently appreciated, you know, you go there, and if you've got kind of heritage there, people will place you, like there's a sort of Shetland family tree. So you're walking along and it's like, oh, I knew your dad. Yeah. Oh, your dad was my second cousin's partner's whatever, you know, and they take a moment to sort of place you there and place you in the history and place you sort of on a map of the place. So, which was, like, as I say, I grew up in cities, so it was a very sort of startling contrast to the way that I usually identify or connect with the place.
Because you mentioned about globalization and the fact that, you know, we are, if you like, becoming across Europe more bland. Everywhere's got a coffee place. Everybody is wearing the same sort of clothing. And this might sound a bit sort of left field, but I'm talking to you from southern Spain and the pueblos, you know, in inland Spain. People didn't tend to leave, so everybody knows where somebody came from. You didn't need CCTV because you've got the abuelas, the grandmothers, and it's sort of friendly, but it can be, I suppose. Could you say it's a little bit suffocating if you're a young person and you're looking to go to the mainland, because there's been this migration, if you like, from these villages in inland Spain to the cities?
Well, it's not really for me to say because I didn't grow up there. I wasn't growing up as a young person there, but I think my impression is that Shetland's suffering what a lot of places are suffering, in that young people kind of have to leave because there's no jobs. So it's not a matter of, it's like, you know, when you're young, you kind of just want to go somewhere different and make your mark somewhere else anyway. But it's also a matter of, you know, seeking the opportunities. So, yeah, I think that's definitely an issue there. Just jobs in general is an issue.
So your father passed away, and he'd gone back to Shetland when he
That's
left
right.
Glasgow. And you went back for the funeral. Were you based in Devon at that time? Were you in Glasgow? Where?
No, yeah, I was in Devon. So he died. He retired there in 2013, and so he inherited a croft, which is a small holding. Basically, it's like about 7 acres of fields, and he inherited this from his granddad, and he built a house there. So he spent the years after his retirement building a house. And just a year after he'd finished that house, I mean, typically for Dad, because he was a potter, so he worked at the ceramics department. The first thing he built was a workshop, and then he built a house. So he was sleeping in the workshop and doing his work. And then eventually he was like, all right, I better build a house now. So once he'd done it, so just a year he had in that house, and then he died. And we went up there thinking, so this was February 2020. So it feels like another world ago, because, what was about to happen, which nobody expected. Few people expected. And we went up there with sort of enough stuff to go to a funeral, maybe stay a few weeks. My daughter was 4 at the time. And then COVID hit and lockdown hit, and we had to make a decision. Are we going to stay here, or are we going to spend like 2 days going back on public transport, when we don't know what this infection is going to do, that we've got a little girl, we don't know what the risks are. So we decided to stay, and we ended up there 7 months. And it was it was a difficult time for everybody, but in some ways we were lucky because, we were in a house, we had 7 acres of fields. I mean, it was an incredibly intense time because I didn't know Dad very well. I was never close to him. And yet suddenly I was in his house, surrounded by all his things, in a land where his ancestors, well, mine as well, had lived and had made their mark. There were ruins just outside the house of where his dad was born. And across the road was the house where my dad had been born. And across the bay was the graveyard where they're all buried. So it's like from a window, you can see the life cycle of all these Browns, So there was no escape. Everybody felt confined and restricted during that time. And this was a sort of, it was a very, unique way, I think, of having to sort of spend that grieving period. But it was good as well, because it was almost like an exorcism of those feelings. It forced me to really be present and really focus on that loss. So it was sort of like, instead of just getting on with everything and ignoring it and repressing it, I was like, oh my gosh, here it is. Here's Dad. Everywhere I look, here's Dad. And so I was like, well, what does Dad mean to me? What does this place mean to me? Where am I in this place? And after the 7 months, I began to understand that.
Well, because this is the thing, because we spend all our lives running around and trying to craft identities for ourselves from when we're teenagers, basically up until we draw our last breath. But very few of us take the time to look into, if you like, our family until perhaps you get a little older. And as I said, in that environment, especially in Shetland, obviously everybody knows where everybody comes from. You're not only discovering, maybe you set out to discover your father, and I'm not going to get all the Hallmark movie on you, but you discover yourself. Because as we get older, we do wonder where we come from. We do wonder what our place is in the scheme of things.
Yeah, for sure. And also being a parent out there, I think, having my wee girl with me and kind of seeing myself in my wee girl as well. So there was that element too. And I was exploring the croft as well. She was 4. And, me and my then partner were having to balance like work. And luckily we could both work from home, or otherwise the story wouldn't have happened. So we were balancing that and then exploring everything from the height of a 4-year-old. And the way that 4-year-olds see the world is like looking at moss for about 10 minutes, which was great. Forcing yourself to look at the microcosm, really in a joyful way. And, it was very therapeutic. It was very hard. It was very intense. But in the end, it was very therapeutic. And so as I sort of was reconciling my relationship with Dad and sort of understanding him a little bit better, so it felt, then I began to see myself. I found little pieces of myself in the house, like things that he'd kept that I'd made as a kid, or photographs that I'd never seen or didn't remember of me, and things like that. So I was like, okay, so I was important to him, and sort of really kind of being more open about those memories. And then then there's translating into a sort of connection with the landscape and the landscape around, and kind of feeling like part of this place. And then, because I was a journalist at the time, this is an environmental journalist, I learned about this wind farm that was going to be built. So it had received permission for an interconnector. So it was a really crucial point of the development. And I read in the newspaper that this wind farm's going to happen, but it had been very divisive, and it was a 20-year project, and it had started off with this promise of a lot of community benefit that had been whittled down to just £2 million community benefit compared to £20 million. So it was a huge difference. I was like, wow, how did that happen? What is going on? And then I realized I would be able to see the edge of this wind farm. So it was 103 turbines, 150 meters high, in quite a flat landscape, highest hills around about 200 meters. So it's going to be big, it's going to be dramatic, and I'd be able to see it from Dad's house. So I thought, wow, this is huge, and how do I really feel about it? And I had to kind of interrogate myself a little bit, and I didn't know how I felt about it. So my immediate instinct was, I want to talk to people. Like, as a journalist, I was like, I want to find out people's stories. I want to find out how other people connect to the land, how other people would define their sense of belonging to this land, and how then that translates into how they feel about something like a wind farm, which is clearly necessary for the transition from fossil fuels. But, what does this actually mean to their sense of identity?
Yeah, not only that, we have the same thing on the Costa de la Luz with the wind farms, because obviously the Atlantic meets the Mediterranean. And if you drive to Tarifa, which is a very popular spot for kite surfing, suddenly when I first went there in the 80s, nothing there, brilliant. Yeah. And now there are these huge wind farms, and the mayors will say, well, this is great because it brings investment and it's putting us on the forefront, as politicians always do, but it's kind of sort of wrecked the landscape when you look across to Morocco, because yes, they're very lovely and the whole thing. I mean, they're producing energy, or are they? And if they, and especially with somewhere like Shetland, which is obviously historically valuable, it's unique. Are there two camps? Some saying, well, this will bring jobs and investment and put us at the forefront, and others saying, well, yeah, but it's all very well that somebody at Westminster say, put it up there, not on our front garden.
Yeah, it's what's really fascinating about this, the Viking Energy wind farm in particular, is that it's part of a huge story of energy exploitation in which Shetland has really been a key player all along the way. Like everything from whaling to obviously the oil industry. Shetland managed to broker a deal in the 1970s where they managed to make a decent amount of money from the oil companies because of Sullom Voe, so landing oil barrels. They got money from owning the land. And this money really did a huge amount to sort of improve the life of many people on the island. Infrastructure, things like leisure centres. Suddenly there were swimming pools everywhere. Jobs, really important for the economy there. So they benefited hugely. But as the years went by, the oil coffers, the money from that was going down, and they were like, oh, hang on a minute, we don't want to go back. We don't. People felt like they were at risk of going backwards. And they were like, well, what can we do? Well, we've got another resource, which is not going away. Wind. It's really windy in Shetland. For anybody who hasn't been, it's the kind of place where you've got to be careful where you park, or your car doors will blow off. Your
car doors will blow off.
There's always a risk. It's like, if it's very windy, it's like, well, you've got to park at a particular angle, or, be careful when you're opening the doors, or just don't open it because the doors will blow off.
Blimey.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that's every day. I'm just saying you might be warned to do that. So it's like, well, let's make the most of this resource, because it was also a time of what was described to me by one interviewer as prospecting for wind. So lots of energy companies were coming and looking to see where it would be good to put a wind farm. So there's not just the issue of, somebody from south, as you're saying, let's put this wind farm here. It's also a matter of, a local community saying, we want to benefit from this transition. We can see that it's necessary. And initially, it was the community people from there who were really trying to take control of that conversation and sort of say, yeah, we want a Shetland majority share of this project. And we want to sort of shape it in the same way that they managed to shape the deal in the 70s with the oil companies. So they were wanting to be in control. And kind of, I got the sense that people thought this was inevitable. This is going to happen anyway, just like the oil in the 70s. So it's like, well, let's get the most out of it that we can. And there's another element to it, which is like, okay, you profited from the oil. We have to move to renewables because we can see the climate catastrophe creeping into all of our lives now. This has got to happen. So, do we have a responsibility to do that? We've benefited hugely. So let's play our part in giving back, So there's all of these aspects. And also, as you say, the feeling that this was done, this was change that wasn't, that was pushed by energy companies and Scottish government rather than the local people. All sorts of things going on in the conversations. But ultimately, I maybe spoke to dozens of people, not everybody, not all the conversations made it into the book, but there was always a sense that people cared very deeply for the islands, no matter what part they played in the development of this project, no matter what their stance, they had really deep affection and for the Isles, and they wanted the best for the Isles. And this is really kind of what I wanted to push the message, because I don't take a stance on it. I don't feel like I can. But what I do want to impress on readers is that, everybody wants the best for Shetland. It's just that we all need to kind of think, we need to probe some of the questions at the root of it, like, who is this? Are we talking about an energy transition, or are we talking about a just energy transition? And what's the difference? And what do we need to do to enable it to be just? And are we talking about simply switching from one energy source to another? Or do we really need to change mindsets and think about how we use energy, who benefits from energy? And, if we're going to look forward to a kind of livable future and mitigate as much as we can of the worst of the climate crisis, what do we need to change about the way that we live in order for that to happen?
I'm kind of thinking that maybe Shetland Islanders are living a relatively sort of environmentally friendly way, because the carbon footprint isn't hard. Okay, you've got oil on the doorstep, but we're always being told, what with remote working, etc., to cut travel out and live more simply and work from home, etc. And also this whole thing of as you discover more about where you fit into, in fact, you were fitting into your father's life. Also, it's you have become part of that community and what it means. I mean, I don't suppose you think yourself as fully a Shetlander, because you're not there now, but you discover a little more about, we have to consult communities as well, rather than just going, right, we're going to put that there and you will appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you've got to have consent. And the reason that the project went, the community benefit pot went so awry was because people felt that they hadn't been consulted on this huge plan, and it took the Scottish Government to court and delayed the project at a crucial time when they were wanting to get government subsidies. So it led to the Shetland side having to withdraw a substantial amount of their investment, because under charity rules they couldn't have a stranded investment, so they had to withdraw and only keep it to, I think it was 10 million what they put in. So that meant that the percentage of the community benefit pot at the end was reduced by a huge amount. So what they'd originally pitched was something that was going to be, hugely beneficial for the Shetland community, ended up being, although it's still a lot of money, £2 million, it's not what people had imagined it would be at the beginning. And the sense of grievance was so strong. And so, sorry, I've rambled on. I actually can't remember what your question was.
So you need to consult the local people and get them involved, rather than just sort of saying, right, bam, there you are, you're doing your bit for the environment, and we're not hearing anything, because this is what's happened in Spain, and local people are saying, well, we don't want that, and they were promised money if you put a wind turbine on your land. But at the end of the day, it's still big corporations and local governments, who are getting especially in Spain, the big corporations are getting the money out of this.
Yeah, no, this is a really difficult thing. I mean, what my research led me to get more involved in is community-owned energy. So I left journalism as a result of this book, and an opportunity arose from a Bristol-based community energy cooperative. So I joined that, and it's quite a small sector. I know you've got community energy going on in Spain as well, but it's all about getting it's energy renewable energy assets that are designed by, for, and with communities. So you might, for example, have a wind turbine. There's one just outside Bristol, and which the community get together and they decide, well, we've got this land, or the council have got this land, we want to have a turbine which it's not for profit, but any money generated from it is going to go back into the community. And it's in a place called Lawrence Weston, which was quite a kind of, people felt like it was quite ignored. It's quite a sort of economically deprived area. And it took them 9 years to get this turbine built, because of very sort of obstructive policies from the government here, who are not a fan of onshore wind. But they did it, and it's now generating, it will be, I think, it's a substantial amount of money for the community, and it's a landmark of pride and a real kind of sign of what can be done, and people are so proud of it. And it's just a symbol of what energy should be about. It's going to help people who most need it. It's going to help people sort of build the place that they live together. So this is kind of what the symbol of what this could be, and if you look at a turbine, the difference between seeing the turbine that's just, as you say, like, you see it as something that's exporting energy to us sort of faceless sort of asset managers, or you see a turbine that's energizing your community, reaching people who are vulnerable, helping your life. It's just like, it's a world of difference.
And also the flip side is that is the way we are going, but it's also in action, because people say, oh, well, I'm not going to take my bin out because, hey, China pumps X amount of toxins into the air. But if you can see the benefits that something that is renewable is doing to your immediate community, it's going to, rather than having some lofty ideas about energy, renewable energies.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is as well, though, we mustn't forget that it is really important to remember that we have to have renewable energy. I mean, like, people get used to seeing power stations and things on the skyline, and people get used to seeing SUVs tearing through, the high streets and so forth. But these are the things that are causing most harm. These are the things that are choking up our seas. They are choking up our skies, that are, creating kids having asthma attacks and things like that. That's the problem is it's invisible. So, like, the problem with carbon emissions is invisible. If it was pink or blue, we'd all see the horrendous cost of this, of burning fossil fuels. And also, I mean, I used to live in Vietnam for a long time, and one of the most arresting and shocking photos of which I think represents, for me, the horrors of the climate crisis. There was a photo of a man whose village had been swept away by a landslide, by flooding, which, is caused by the climate crisis, or made worse by the climate crisis. He'd lost everything. He'd lost his wife. He'd lost his kids. He'd lost his home, swept away. And he was staring, just this blank stare. And he just looked. This was just the absolute personification of sorrow and loss, and this is what the climate crisis is. This is what it means. And We've got to remember that. We've got to remember the actual impact on people right now.
When you come to write this book, and you write as well as you quote unquote ramble, it's a fantastic read. What are you hoping? What are you hoping that people take from this?
Well, I hope they enjoy it. I hope people, it's a point of interest for people to start questioning and start probing how they see the world. And I'm not, some people have sort of asked me, what's your stance on the wind farm? And I just I don't want to, that's not what it's about. It's not about saying this was the right or wrong thing to do. It's asking why it happened and what we need to learn in going forward. And I'm not sort of saying, let's all hug and be friends, because it's really difficult if you've fallen out with somebody over something as big. It's caused huge divisions in Shetland. But what I am saying is we mustn't be distracted from the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is an economic system which is sucking our planet dry. And we just need to think of new ways of living, with each other and with energy, which are going to enable us to have a livable future. Because it's just crunch time now. Fire and flood everywhere. We've got to act.
The book is called The Shetland Way, Community and Climate Crisis on My Father's Island. It's by Marianne Brown, who we're speaking to today. Marianne, social media, websites, where can people find more about you and also the projects that you're doing?
Oh, thank you very much. Well, I've ditched X, as most of your listeners probably have too, rather sensibly. So you'll just find Dead Space there. But I do have an Instagram. I know Meta's awful as well, but I have sort of recently revived my Instagram. So you can go there for like clips and things. So that's just Brown Marianne, S for Sierra, Instagram. And also you can look at Bristol Energy Cooperative, because that's where I work, and we're doing some great things there. And please do, get involved or have a look at community energy in Spain too. I'm sure there's lots of great things going on there
Just
too.
Give me the name of that Bristol. What's it called again, please?
Sorry, it's called Bristol Energy Cooperative. And I'm just looking at it's just bristolenergy.coop.
bristolenergy.coop, and you can order the book via our own virtual bookstore as well. The book is called The Shetland Way. We have our moments. The book is called The Shetland Way. It is by Marianne Brown. Marianne, it's been absolutely fascinating to speak to you today.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. It was a pleasure.